Hey, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please subscribe because we've got great content, fun jokes, kind of, interesting guests and interviews. Really great channel. So please subscribe and of course share with your friends. And we're gonna get the joke out of the way, right? Of course. So what kind of shoes do spies wear? Like a spy, right? A spy for a country or whatever. All spies wear sneakers. You're like, that's so lame. Yeah, I agree with you. So let's move on to some really exciting content called Not So Famous. And last week we talked who is Hushai. Well, this week we're going to talk about who is Nicodemus. And you know, you think about some of these names in the Bible and you're like, where do they come up with these names? I mean, I can tell you some names like that you think, woof, Cheddar, Shushan, Rishtheim. I mean, that's one of the ones in the Old Testament, like, wow. So Nicodemus is easy by comparison. But who's Nicodemus? Well, the first place we meet him is in John chapter 3. We're peppering in here, kind of going back and forth between the Old Testament and New Testament. And in John chapter 3, Nicodemus, we learn that he is a Pharisee who comes to Jesus. I want to make sure, yep, Pharisee. I get sometimes Pharisee and Sadducee mixed up. He was a Pharisee. So he comes to Jesus at nighttime. And it's kind of a solo on the side. So it's not when Jesus is teaching a big crowd and there's all kinds of people around. This is like a one-on-one conversation. This is where Jesus makes the statement, you must be born again. You know, that's a common term that people use a lot in Christianity. You got to be born again. What does that mean? But this is where they reference, and it's not used, this term born again is not a common, it's not like repetitive, like multiple times. This is a one-off conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus. And I find it interesting that Jesus tells him you must be born again, and Nicodemus immediately, he doesn't get it. He's like, how's a person born again? Do they go back into their mom's womb? Come out a second time? It's kind of a concrete, you know, he's not really getting any kind of like theoretical or symbolic in their, ideas in this. But Jesus speaks to him about you have to be born after the Spirit. You have to have a fresh beginning with God, with the Holy Spirit, with Jesus. And Nicodemus is a Pharisee, and the Pharisees don't really like Jesus that much. There's a lot of tension and conflict between the Pharisees and Jesus. But Nicodemus, I think he's a really powerful dude because even though he's part of the Pharisees and that's his underpinnings, that's his mindset, mind frame, he comes to Jesus and has an interesting dialogue, conversation back and forth. And I'd encourage you, if you get a chance, read the conversation because the back and forth, you can see Nicodemus really start to muse and think about what is Jesus saying. And the longer he has a conversation, the more you see Nicodemus kind of settle in with Jesus. And it's really interesting because as you watch Nicodemus over the course of Jesus' life, his first conversation, and then later on, when there's a conflict, the Pharisees are like, we should get rid of Jesus, we should have him killed. And Nicodemus stands up for Jesus. And Nicodemus says, doesn't our own law say that he should go through a process before we just like choose to make him guilty? So Nicodemus, from that conversation, he continues to grow in his relationship and defending Jesus, even against his own group. And then finally, when Jesus is dead, it says that Nicodemus provided aromatics to prepare Jesus' body. And you can read about Nicodemus in John 3, in John 7, verses 50 and 51, and then also in John 19, verse 39. And I like watching Nicodemus over the course of Jesus' life because I see him choose to embrace, choose to follow, choose to believe in Jesus, even when it runs against his own community, his own upbringing, his own conventional, traditional training. He chooses to be loyal and consistent, faithful to Jesus. Jesus tells Nicodemus, John 3 verse 3, you must be born again. So here's my question for you to answer here. What does born again mean to you? Right? And not just the cliche, but what does this specifically mean to you? So answer that question. And of course, Thank you for subscribing. You want to hit the notification bell right there because we'll keep you posted when we put up new content. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Catch you next week for Not So Famous.